What is gluten? A protein found in wheat, barley, and rye and is generally characterized by villous atrophy, crypt hyperplasia, and increased intraepithelial lymphocytes. Presenting symptoms typically include postprandial bloating and weight loss. Celiac disease, an illness which is caused by gluten, is present in about 1% of the population.
In the absorption cells of the intestines, there is a singular layer of cells that lines the villi called the zonulin barrier. As the soup of nutrients is passing through the lumen of the small intestine, the bloodstream is right on the other side of the singular layer of cells. What happens is the bloodstream is over here, and they're saying,
"Hey, I need an iron."
the zonulin barrier opens up and an iron molecule goes through, and it gets carried by the red blood cells. All the nutrients are being absorbed through the small intestine, but then wheat comes along. Wheat is a very complex amino acid. It is one of the largest ones. Genetically speaking, wheat has a more complex DNA signature than a human being. So here's wheat coming down the small intestine and saying,
"Hey, zonulin barrier, I'm a big old wheat molecule, and you gotta let me through, okay?"
and it opens the doors. Here comes this large molecule, and the passageway stays open for so long because of the way that wheat triggers the zonulin barrier. Then everything else in close vicinity comes along as well. This can include bacteria, viruses, eggs, coffee, whatever else you had for breakfast with the wheat. It all goes into the bloodstream, whether it's fully digested or not. These molecules don't belong in the bloodstream, and the human body is not programmed to have this kind of contamination in the blood. In response to this foreign invasion, the body sends down a military of white blood cells to get rid of these contaminants in the bloodstream. It creates T cell activity against those items. So frequently, people with celiac disease have lots of other food allergies as well, as cross-reactivity issues with chocolate, coffee, and other types of products where the signature proteins are similar to that of wheat.
Alzheimer's could be linked to gluten because the zonulin barrier in your brain is the gluten passing into your brain. And because we have relatively low circulation in our brain, you don't have a lot of blood in your brain. It's basically an electrical source of activity. There's not much blood, right? Mm-hmm. But if the gluten goes through the zonulin barrier and gets into your brain, there's no way to remove it. So is it causing some of these problems that we're getting with dementia?
Aside from this theory, there are a wide range of symptoms associated with celiac disease, non-celiac gluten sensitivity, and gluten intolerance. Even individuals that don't test positive for celiac disease or have a histamine reaction, they may have a gluten response. This encompasses anything that is a negative reaction. Some people have bloating, some experience gas, others experience nausea, headaches, brain fog, or joint pain. Greater scale systemic responses include diarrhea or constipation, abdominal pain and or heartburn, fatigue, anemia, rashes, depression, and anxiety. On the other end of the spectrum, some individuals don't present symptoms, but that doesn't mean they are not having a gluten response. The only fix for all of these symptoms is a gluten-free diet. So you may be asking yourself, what exactly is happening when a person has a reaction to gluten?
An IG reaction is fairly quick, and that's what you see with a peanut allergy. And that anaphylaxis shock that people get when they have a peanut allergy is actually intense swelling of the soft tissues from their throat going down to their lungs, and the swelling is so fast that you can't get any oxygen and you literally choke to death. Because the alveoli in your lungs are swollen as well. So imagine, if you've ever had hives, right? Imagine your lung tissues lined with hives. There's no place for there to be an exchange of oxygen to give you any oxygen in your blood. And that's what people die when they have anaphylactic shock. So taking Benadryl, an EpiPen, will resolve that. So if you have an IgE reaction to wheat, you can actually take an antihistamine.
The first and most important component of testing is that the patient should continue to consume gluten before and while being tested. The first method of testing is by trial and error. Many individuals have found through this method that they feel significantly better on a gluten-free diet and that it didn't matter to them if they had an actual allergy. A second method is done by taking a blood test. This requires a blood draw and will allow the doctor to determine if you have an allergy based on whether or not there are antibodies against gluten in the blood. Lastly, although expensive and somewhat invasive, an endoscopy is another form of testing. A series of biopsy samples will be taken from the small intestine and will allow the doctor to determine the amount of damage on the villi.
So, what's the point?
Go learn about food and then pay attention to what your body says when you eat it. Your body, if you can fine tune your awareness, it will tell you whether or not that agrees with you.
Yes.
You know, it's like if you drink too much beer and you wake up with a hangover the next morning, maybe you won't drink so much beer next time.
Yeah.
You know, there's a message there. And I don't want, God knows all of us have done things to excess, me included. And I think that's part of learning and growing and finding our boundaries in life. And that's a good thing. We need to do that. And you want to do that because you really need to know what it feels like to feel bad. Because if you don't make yourself sick by drinking too much or by eating too much chocolate, then you don't know what it feels like to feel bad. So you can't appreciate it when you feel good. So on one side, I want everybody to go and explore. I want everybody to eat things they shouldn't. I want you to just be excessive, especially while you're in college. Now's the time to do it. But learn about how to manage a good, healthy, and I don't want to call it a diet because diet is really negative. You know, it has this thing like, A, it's short term, B, you only have to be on it for a little while, and once everything is resolved, you can go back to eating the way you were eating before. I want people to make lifelong choices for their food, which will be nutrient dense, high quality, and sustaining to their physical bodies.